A very good morning and thank you very much for staying with Metropole TV. This is Business AM Ondiro Ganga, standing in for Elijah Charles Simbakage. Time now for our interview today, and we're joined by Mr. Ben Roberts, who is the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Liquid Telecom, and we're here to just have a brief conversation on integration of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things network for business success. Thank you very much, Robert, for making time. First things first, this week on Thursday, the CIO conference commences here in Nairobi. Briefly bring the viewer up to speed with what is the CIO conference?
Okay, so the CIO conference is about Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, so what we call AI and IoT. I think it's the third one that they've had in Nairobi. And this year, it's been a bit of an early stage technology, and I think this year some of the conversations will be about scaling up an application rather than just introduction to new technologies. So we're hoping for some good stuff to happen. Yeah.
When you talk about scaling up, what do you exactly mean?
Well, a lot of innovation is going on, and Internet of Things particularly is quite accessible. You can do IoT projects on your kitchen table. You can make up electronics. It's quite simple to do. A lot of students are doing this. I've seen last week I saw some student projects, people doing smart bins, smart boders. These are things that are coming out of our innovation hubs, our tech colleges. But really we're at a stage of some of these technologies got to scale up into industry, become mainstream applications, and that's what we're seeing. We've laid down a network for IoT devices, but we're seeing the kinds of people who are adopting are starting to put it into mainstream applications like agriculture, supply chain, looking after assets and tracking of assets, these kinds of things. It's early days for the whole industry in Kenya. Globally, there's about sort of maybe 12 or 13 billion devices locally for a population of 6 billion people. So there's about 2 devices per person globally. Kenya's got about 1 IoT device for 45 million people, so we're quite a way behind. We have a way to catch up.
What are some of the new innovations that we are seeing or expect to see, not just in the Kenyan context, but even in the global context? What kind of innovations are shaking the market right now?
There's a lot going on in the world of artificial intelligence. There's things like image recognition, adaptive speech recognition, so computers learning to talk human languages. Really, also a lot of innovation going on locally, and I think we are focusing on, or we're seeing a lot of focus on, solutions for problems we have here. So, when we talk of, say, a smart city, Barcelona is a very well-known smart city and has been done in a certain way. But the problems of a city like Nairobi are very different from the problems of a city like Barcelona. So, the solutions become around, not so much even smart bins, but around traffic control and speeding up. Collection of parking monies. These are the types of things we're going to see happening first in the cities here.
So for us, Nairobi and maybe Kenya, we need to tailor-make solutions that solve the Kenyan problem, not necessarily technology that is aligned to the global movement.
Absolutely. The technology is very similar. I mean, what IoT is an ecosystem of devices which are collecting information about the environment and the earth. It's cloud computing, which is doing the processing, and then the outcomes, and this is where AI comes in. Learning about the information and translating this into outcomes, but it starts from a problem. So if we're talking about agriculture, a lot of applications for IoT in agriculture, but a smallholder farmer in Kenya is working from the very beginning with very different methods of farming from a highly mechanized grain farm in Iowa, USA. So the application is very different.
And how do some of these innovations help propel both the Kenyan economy and the global economy?
Really big impacts we're expecting to see on in the field of agriculture. for both in the growing space in terms of, you know, monitoring soil temperatures, monitoring livestock, but also in supply chain. So, you know, a lot of the problems of Kenyan agriculture is in around when you start moving the goods around, they become damaged. A lot of food is wasted in Kenya. This can make a huge difference to the Kenyan economy.
Also, another thing that is a big issue in the Kenyan economy is tourism. We majorly depend on tourism. However, the number of elephants, giraffes, and many wild animals have been going down due to poaching. And we know the kind of foreign exchange that the government gets from tourism. So how do we then use AI and IoT to ensure that we kind of tame illicit trade of wild animals?
We have worked with Olipogetic Conservancy, so they have a Wildlife Technology Innovation Lab. And they're trying out various different types of technology for conservation tech, but we've worked with them on the IoT side. But now, with some of the innovations that are going on in the space of IoT, if you were tracking an animal 5 years ago, you know, say a lion or something, you'd have a really large collar and a big device that would be here, you know, a bit intrusive to the animal itself. We're now working with we're testing rhino trackers in Zimbabwe. We're testing them, but they're about the size of a man's finger. You know, they're that sort of size. So you can put them into the horn of a rhino. So you start tracking that. A lot of possibilities around reducing human-wildlife conflict. So if you can have CCTV cameras at the boundary fences, if you can, you know, in Olipogetic we're tracking the cattle, but with an aim that we start, you know, tracking the lions as well. So the cattle herders can be warned when the lions are nearby. They're losing 60 cows a year to lions. So a combination of reducing poaching itself, which they're doing very well at with increased techniques and you know, like night cameras and image recognition. These are all AI techniques. This is really helping. But reducing human-wildlife conflict is going to make an even bigger impact.
However, you know, we've just been talking about artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, and someone might think there may be one and the same. Is there a difference between the two, and where does the difference come in?
Okay, so Internet of Things is it's small sensors that collect information. So it's small electronic devices. They'll communicate via a network to the internet. So they are collecting data and really, you know, you can collect large amounts of data. AI is using computers for what we call, you know, cognitive learning. It's around, you know, learning about data in the way that more like a human mind would think. You know, if we can get data and we can put it in a database, and I could write a program to analyze that data. That's just traditional data processing. But AI, you know, the computer is learning about the data, developing models, and you know, having greater insight. So they're very well linked, because AI is one of the techniques that you use when you get this data from IoT to start analyzing.
So with this information, how do we combine the two to drive utmost value out of them?
That's where the innovation comes in. This is where our businesses need to apply them. The infrastructure for both is essentially there. So, you know, for Internet of Things, you can connect them up on fiber networks, Wi-Fi networks. We have a countrywide, low power wide area Sigfox network. There were 4G is there, 5G is coming. So there's a whole bunch of different technologies to connect. And then when you get to AI, you can either use cloud technologies. You can very quickly scale up using cloud. But then if you want to, you know, if you really find something, you need to start using heavy computing. You know, you need special computers for AI, and they need to be in special data centers. You can't put them in your computer room in your thing. But again, the data centers are here in Kenya, so we have all the infrastructures there, and really it is now about application. Looking for business problems, making the savings, making the gain in efficiency, and justifying the budget to do so. It's about creating business cases.
Every sector has its own challenges. What are some of the challenges that you people face in this sector?
In the technology sector, we have quite a lot of challenges with, you know, the road constructions. It's all the time. So we put a lot of fiber network in the ground. Road construction is damaging that most of the time. That's our biggest challenge. But also taxation. We're seeing, you know, across Africa, We're seeing weird and wonderful taxations being applied on things through technology. We're seeing revenue authorities not necessarily understanding things like e-commerce or whatever, and applying taxes. You know, maybe before we're in certain areas that are in an infancy, and they want to get a wider net into the tax bracket, and that is necessary for Kenya. But we see application being done without necessarily understanding the technologies at heart.
What lessons can Kenya draw from global giants that have made many steps ahead of us, in that once we apply those lessons, then we can also make strides in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably would be hard to compare, you know, to learn lessons from, you know, countries like USA, China, these superpowers, and, you know, they're very different in terms of where Kenya is from. But, you know, some countries, you know, places like Estonia, a very small country, coming only 25 years old or so, coming out of, you know, Soviet rule, they've progressed massively in the field of AI, and I think there's been quite a lot of events here, you know, Estonia, Estonian companies doing that. I think Kenya can learn from countries like that. You know, start with, you know, where it makes sense. You know, you're not going to try and build China's manufacturing industry, because that's a bridge too far. Yeah.
And how is the business uptake? Kenyan businesses, are they embracing artificial intelligence and Internet of Things? And what lies therein for them?
Yeah, they're starting to. I mean, it's as I say, it's the third of these summits, but, you know, we're seeing a lot of our corporate clients are using IoT applications. They're thinking of tracking. You know, where are my assets? Where are my vehicles? Where are my pallets? Where are my goods? Where is my container? It's very important for corporates to know this and be able to speed up supply chains, whether you're in manufacturing or retail or you know, whatever it is. You know, that's really important, and I think that's going to be the biggest application for corporates, but also metering, you know, smart metering. This is more for utilities, but, you know, we're seeing a lot of interest in water metering, electricity metering, which is currently done. People have to go and read meters, and that in itself has potential for corruption, because, you know, people can change the meter reading, and sometimes meter readers, they get funny when they come to cut you off. So, you know, some of these IoT applications as well can be used to root out corruption.
There has been fear that computers in the near future will come and take jobs that are being held by human beings. And we're beginning to see this. It's beginning to take shape. Banks in Kenya are laying off staff because there are things that machines can do, that human can do, and it's more efficient going the machine way. How do we create a synergy between humans and the machine disruption that is coming in?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's no doubt it's coming. You're talking about banking, and banking is a sector that is being disrupted already, and other sectors like insurance are set to be disrupted. The one that, you know, the one that I would think about most would be security. So if we look at Nairobi, we have a lot of manned security guards, and we don't have many CCTV cameras in comparison. The technology is going to reduce the number of manned guards we're going to need. Let's think about some of these things. You know, there will be a need for the industries who are there to be disrupted to think hard about how to redeploy, retrain, and you know, digitally, as you're digitally transforming, you know, you're still looking after your workforce and your employees. You have to digitally transform your staff. We at Liquid, you know, we've come from doing fiber and data centers. We're moving into cloud and IoT. We're doing a lot of education programs with our staff, our customers as well. So teaching our customers about the technology that we're bringing so that they can adopt it. But we have to, you know, retrain some of our staff in you know, a network engineer has to become a cloud engineer. You know, and if a security guard has to become a CCTV camera installer, these are the types of things we're going to have to, you know, see progress.
I like the fact that you've talked about reskilling and retraining a workforce, because we are in the fourth industrial revolution, which is definitely being powered by artificial intelligence. So our education system has to factor in that. What are some of the things we should consider in our education system to ensure that it's not run out by time? Yeah,
education. I'm having a really deep look at education, actually. I see it for us, it's a big business opportunity for as a service provider. There is you know, a lot going on with the curriculum now for schools and the competency-based curriculum that's coming up. I think that, you know, some thought needs to go into teaching basic principles of how you're going to learn about computers. There needs to be more in the curriculum for some of these, you know, IT techniques of the future. But the linkage between the high school sector, the university sector, and the TVETs has to be, you know, quite well thought out. You know, TVETs at the moment are maybe teaching artisanal skills, welding, electricians and painters and plumbers, but they're going to need to teach you know, some of the more technical, practical skills that we're going to need, you know, around running IT systems, artificial intelligence, that sort of thing. Higher education has then got to focus on more research and you know, driving it forwards. I attended recently the Young Scientist Kenya event at KICC, and I saw some fantastic projects, you know, that were done by school children from 13 to 18. You know, some of them using IoT as well. So fantastic, amazing things. But when I went round, there was an exhibition in the foyer of universities, and I was seeing the projects that were not all that much more advanced from some of the universities there. We need a big step up. We need to be pushing it harder and thinking about the whole transition from when you leave school, do you go to a TVET, do you go to university, what happens next before you move into employment?
Now, for this to come together and thrive, there has to be a right policy framework that has been put in place in a given country by a set government. What kind of framework, policy framework rather, do we need to ensure that artificial intelligence and Internet of Things picks up in this country and works for the good of this country?
Yeah, policy is really important. We have had a fairly progressive policy in Kenya, and that is, you know, testament to where we are now, being a bit ahead of some of our neighbours in the region. A lot of innovation happening and centering here in Nairobi. Really important things are going to be around data protection laws, which are still fumbling around in both Parliament and Senate without a clear direction as to, you know, which bill is going to be passed into law from either side. It still remains the most important thing, but policies have got to enable and allow new technology, and a lot of work was done on a ICT policy. I think it was 2015, 2016. I think that hasn't yet been published, but we're seeing progress. The blockchain and artificial intelligence task force report was published about 2 weeks ago from the government of Kenya, from Batangi and Demo was the chairman. You know, quite revolutionary stuff, really. I think it's the first country in Africa to produce such a policy, such a report. We've got to see some of these things adopted, and I think that, you know, one of the first things we saw arising out of that was, you talked about the Haduma number. We're seeing already that's in progress of implementation. You know, it's you can't use AI to do things like credit scoring and whatever if you don't have data on people and know who they are. So the basis of identity is really important.
However, data protection is not just a challenge in Kenya, it is a challenge globally. And we've seen so many countries, Facebook included, Cambridge Analytica being on the spot for misusing data, or rather not giving the data users or the data owners the right information concerning what their data will be used to do. So when Parliament and Senate are thinking about data protection laws, what kind of things should they put in mind and give key priority to?
They've got to start from the citizen, right? Ultimately, it's if I give my data to Facebook, if I give my data to Safaricom, if I give my data to the government of Kenya, it's my data. Yeah, I'm telling them about me, so they're looking after it for me. You know, the data protection law then governs what they can do with the data that I've given them. You know, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, all these things happening in countries that already have strong data protection law in place. And at the moment we're at risk, we're trusting companies to be honest with data, and companies, you know, like Safaricom and Liquid and Equity Bank, yes, we're good with data, we have our own principles, and we would stand by European laws and GDPR because of, you know, parent shareholders, but Other companies in Kenya may be less scrupulous. They may not be thinking about this, and so we have to be careful.
As we almost come to a close of this conversation, how would the technology sector, what is the outlook maybe in the next 3 or 5 years?
Outlook is going to be a mass proliferation of the numbers of IoT devices. So, as I say, we're starting with about 1 million devices. I'm suggesting that we should be getting towards at least one device for every person, one connected. So, we should be scaling up from 1 million devices to 45 million IoT devices over 2 or 3 5-year period. Yeah? The groundwork, the networks are there. AI, we're going to be seeing more application. We're seeing accessibility to that cloud and computing is there to enable companies to start rapidly developing AI applications, and then they're going to, as they scale those up, they're going to need to invest more in infrastructure and computing here to speed and accelerate the jobs they're doing. Yeah.
Okay, well, before we let you go, your camera is camera 3, so you look into it and maybe speak to the viewer at home of why is it important to attend the CIO conference and maybe what's in it for them.
Okay, yes, so the CIO conference is coming on Thursday. I think there'll be a lot to learn. There'll certainly be some pitches from IoT innovators. We'll be having presentations from some of the industry leaders and experts and vendors, as well as the technology networks like us. So yeah, I think the conversation is hotting up, and IoT in Kenya is set to grow very fast.
Well, there you have it. IoT in Kenya is set to grow very fast. Be sure to attend the conference on Thursday. Details about the conference will be shared on our social media platforms at Metropole TV KE across all digital platforms. Be sure to look out for that information. We want to take a short breath. So much more lined up for you on the other side. Stay with Metropole TV.